At my 25th birthday dinner, my father leaned back in his chair with a glass of wine in his hand and said something that would change everything. He smiled like he was about to tell a joke, but his words cut deeper than any punchline ever could. "Let's be honest," he said, looking around the table at our family. "We only kept you because the tax benefits were worth it." Some people laughed. My mother smiled like it was the cleverest thing she had ever heard. But I watched their faces carefully, and I saw something different. I saw my father exchange a quick glance with my mother, and it wasn't the kind of glance two people share when they are joking. "My name is Madeline Porter," and that moment at the dinner table started me thinking about my entire life in a completely different way. I had always loved my parents, or at least I thought I had. But sitting there at that table, surrounded by relatives and the smell of birthday cake, I began to wonder if maybe I had been wrong about that my whole life. The thought that came into my head was simple but terrifying. What if they were not joking at all? Everyone at the table expected me to react in some big way. My aunt leaned forward like she was waiting for me to yell or cry or do something dramatic. My cousin looked down at her plate, but I did not react the way they expected me to. Instead, I smiled at them, the kind of smile that does not reach your eyes. "Wow," I said in a calm voice that surprised even me. "That is good to know." The silence that came after my words was heavier than any anger or sadness could have been. My father shifted in his chair. He was suddenly less confident than he had been just moments before. That night, back at my apartment, I could not sleep. My mind kept playing the same words over and over again like a song stuck in my head. "You are only worth the tax benefits." The more I thought about it, the more I started thinking about the way my parents had always handled paperwork throughout my entire childhood. They were always insisting on keeping family records and organizing important documents. I had never really looked closely at what those documents actually said. But that night, unable to sleep and full of anger I had never felt before, I decided to look. Inside an old folder that I found in a box under my bed was a collection of papers that made my stomach turn. There were copies of tax filings with my name listed in places where it should not have been. There were credits listed, there were benefits mentioned. There were assistance programs noted. Some of these documents went back nearly 10 years. At first, when I looked at them, I assumed that I must be misunderstanding what I was seeing. But then I saw a document with what looked like my name signed at the bottom, and I knew immediately that something was very wrong. The year printed on that document made my stomach tighten with fear. I was 16 years old when it was filed, and the signature that was supposed to be mine looked like my handwriting, but I knew for a fact that I had never signed that document. I had no memory of signing it. I had never been asked to sign it. Yet there it was, on an official form that had been filed with the government. I spent the rest of the night going through every single document in that folder. The more I examined them, the stranger everything looked. My name appeared again and again in filings that were connected to government tax credits, education grants, and family benefit programs. Each document seemed like it could be real at first glance. They looked official, they had real government stamps on them. But something about when these documents had been filed did not add up in my mind. Some of the benefits listed were supposed to be for students who were enrolled in programs that I had never attended in my entire life. Others required my direct permission as an adult, yet the paperwork showed signatures that had been made years before I had even turned 18. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the stack of papers that was growing larger on my desk. This was not just one mistake, this was a pattern. Someone had been using my identity to claim benefits from the government for many years. And the only people who had access to my personal records were my parents. Then, suddenly, small memories from my childhood started coming back to me. Like the afternoon when my mother insisted that I practice signing my name over and over on a blank sheet of paper. She said it would be useful for school forms, or the many times when my father would ask me to sign envelopes without explaining to me what they were or what they contained. At the time, I had trusted them completely. But now those memories felt very different. They felt calculated. They felt like they were part of a plan. I pulled one of the documents closer to my desk lamp and compared the signature on it very carefully with the old letters I had written as a teenager. The shape of the letters looked eerily similar to the way my mother used to guide my hand when I was practicing how to write. My chest tightened as a terrible thought formed in my mind. Maybe they did not just use my name. Maybe they had taught themselves how to copy my signature so that it looked real. Anger would have been easy at that moment. I could have called them immediately and yelled at them about what I had discovered. But I knew that would not give me the real answers that I needed. Instead, I closed the folder and took a long, slow breath. If my parents had really been using my identity for financial gain, then there would be more evidence somewhere. And I realized something important. The biggest mistake they had made was assuming that I would never look at these documents. So I made a quiet decision right there in my apartment. I would not confront them yet. Instead, I would watch them carefully. I would gather everything I could find. I would collect all the evidence I needed. Because if what I was starting to believe was true, then one careless accusation could give them time to cover everything up. The next morning, I requested copies of all my old financial records from the banks. I expected to find confusion in the paperwork. Instead, I found something much worse. There was a bank account that was listed under my name. An account that I had never opened. An account that had been active for many years. Money had passed through that account regularly, and when I looked at where it came from, I saw deposits tied to tax refunds and government credits. But the withdrawals from that account told the real story. The money had always been transferred out of that account immediately after it came in. It had been transferred to another account that belonged to my parents. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through years of transaction history on my computer. They had not just claimed benefits using my name. They had routed the money directly to themselves. And the account had been opened when I was 19 years old. Old enough that it would look legitimate, but young enough that I might never notice. I decided to test their reaction. A few days later, I called my mother casually. "I'm organizing some financial stuff," I told her in a light voice. "Do you still have my old documents from when I was younger?" There was a silence on the phone that lasted just 1 second too long. "Why would you need those?" she asked carefully. "Just paperwork," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Taxes, student records, that kind of thing." Her tone changed instantly. "Oh, that old stuff is probably long gone by now," which was very strange, because my mother never threw away anything. The moment the call ended, I wrote one word in my notebook: confirmed. A week later, I visited my grandmother at her house. Families hold secrets in strange ways. Halfway through our conversation, she mentioned something unusual. "You were such a blessing when you came along," she said to me softly. "Why?" I asked her gently. She hesitated. "Well, your parents were struggling financially back then," she said quietly. "They said you helped them more than they expected." The way she used the word help stuck in my mind. She did not say that they loved me. She said that I helped them. And the only way a child can help parents who are struggling is if that child is being used to get money. 2 nights later, curiosity pushed me to go back to my parents' house while they were out at a social event. I still had a spare key that they had given me years ago. Inside my father's office was a locked cabinet that I remembered from my childhood. It had always been off limits. This time, I opened it. Inside were dozens of neatly organized folders labeled with years and financial dates. Almost every single one had my name somewhere inside. I spent hours photographing documents with my phone. I took pictures of refund confirmations. I took pictures of tax credit approvals. I took pictures of forms that had been signed. By the time I finished, a terrifying number appeared. Over the past 15 years, my parents had claimed hundreds of thousands of dollars using programs connected to my identity. And none of that money had gone to me. It had all gone directly to them. Instead of confronting my parents immediately, I scheduled a quiet consultation with a lawyer. I laid all the documents across the desk in his office. He examined them very carefully, then he looked up at me with a serious expression. "Did you authorize any of these filings?" he asked me. "No," I said. "I did not sign any of them, and I did not give permission for any of them." He leaned back slowly. "Then your parents may have committed long-term tax fraud," he said quietly. "They have been using your identity to commit a serious crime." The lawyer advised me to be patient and to wait before confronting my parents. Right now, they think you know nothing, he said. That is your advantage. If you confront them now, they will have time to cover everything up. But if you wait, then you will have the upper hand when the time comes. So I waited. I continued gathering evidence. I continued organizing everything I had found. A month later, my parents announced that they were planning a large family reunion. Everyone would be there. It would be a big family event, just like the birthday dinner where my father had made that terrible joke. I realized something immediately. It was the same group of people who had laughed at the birthday dinner. If the truth ever came out, that family reunion would be the perfect place for it to happen. While reviewing the photographs I had taken, I discovered one document that my parents probably hoped no one would ever examine closely. It contained a forged signature, but it was witnessed by a family member. That family member was my uncle. When I casually asked him about the document, he looked confused. I thought that was just a scholarship form, he said to me. His statement filled in a crucial gap. My parents had been telling relatives that they were helping me apply for various programs that never even existed. By the time the family reunion arrived, the file that I had built was overwhelming. There were bank transfers, there were forged signatures, there were fraudulent claims. Everything was perfectly organized and documented. Everyone gathered in the same dining hall where celebrations were always held. My father stood up to make a speech, just like he had done at my birthday dinner. But this time, I was ready. This time, I was the one who asked to speak next. I stood up slowly and calmly. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply began to present the documents, one by one. Every signature, every transfer, every false claim. Every piece of evidence that I had gathered over the months. I showed them the bank accounts. I showed them the forged signatures. I showed them the money that had been transferred from accounts in my name to accounts that belonged to my parents. The room turned against my parents very quickly. The same relatives who had laughed at the birthday dinner now stared in complete shock. They looked at my parents with disappointment and anger. They realized that what I was saying was true. They realized that my parents had been committing fraud for years. In the end, I did not yell at my parents. I did not insult them or call them names. I simply walked away from that reunion, knowing something that my parents had never expected to happen. The daughter that they had thought was only worth tax benefits was the one who would finally expose the truth about them. The daughter that they had used and manipulated was the one who had gathered all the evidence and presented it to the entire family. The daughter that they had hurt was the one who had taken control of the situation. My parents faced legal consequences for their actions. They had to repay the money that they had fraudulently claimed. They had to deal with the shame of what they had done. But more than that, they had to deal with the loss of their daughter's trust. Sometimes the best revenge is not about anger or violence. Sometimes it is about telling the truth and standing up for yourself.